Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is Monday, January the 29th, 2018. TowerGate Day 326. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, we are moving very, very close to the point where it's going to be time to start talking about the T word. Treason. There's already people talking about it. But as we move farther down this road and we see, once the memo is released and once the other two committees finish their work and they put out their memos and more memos will follow, and this thing all unravels, we are going to see that we probably are in the territory of what could be considered very easily treason. Just to make sure, why don't we check the Webster Dictionary for the definition of treason? Treason, the offense of attempting by overt acts to overthrow the government of the state to which the offender owes allegiance, or to kill or personally injure the sovereign or the sovereign's family, the betrayal of trust, treachery. One more time. Treason, the offense of attempting overt acts to overthrow the government of the state to which the offender owes allegiance, or to kill or personally injure the sovereign or the sovereign's family, the betrayal of trust, treachery. Does this plot betray our trust? I think it does. Is it an act of treachery? Of course it is. Was it an act to overthrow the government, the elected leader of the government? It absolutely was. By all counts, many of these criminals are going to meet the classical definition in the Webster Dictionary of treason. So the T word will be on the tongues of many in the weeks and months to come. 50,000 texts? That is the number of texts we're being told exist between Peter's been stroking us and Lisa Page in the time period in question. We are literally talking about hundreds of texts a day. How is that possible? Is that all that these two did, was sit back and text back and forth all day? When did they actually have any time to do any work other than the work that they were doing on committing treason? Someone needs to break out the calculator and figure out exactly how many texts per day that would be. I think that Peter Benstrokinus and Lisa Page need to refund whatever salary we paid them because they clearly weren't working. If you had an employee working for you and you found out that he texted 50,000 times over the course of about 9 months, you could only conclude that he wasn't doing very much work on the clock. He was sitting around texting all the time. That will get you fired, and you certainly shouldn't be paid. It's not what we are paying these people to do. But it appears that that is exactly what they devoted most of their time to. Texting about bringing about a deep state coup. That's a lot of texts. You know, there was a comment made by Steve in the comment section where he makes the point that this whole thing that we're dealing with here is not just something that's, you know, a national issue with our elections in 2016 and the coup within the deep state, the State Department, the DOJ, the FBI, the Obama administration. But this was actually, as Steve mentions in his comment, it was really an international effort. Of course, we had obviously Christopher Steele and Mr. Baumgartner are British guys. We had Mr. Downer, who's an Australian. We have allegedly these 5 or 6 Russian sources, or the guys who are said to be sources, which are Russian. We had all these other players, not to mention we had the government of the UK openly opposed to Trump. We had governments, the government of Ukraine openly against Trump. We had governments all over Europe. We had the entire EU, leadership of the EU, opposed to Trump. Apparently, everyone was opposed to Trump, and they were all colluding together. This was an international effort to stop Trump. It was an international or global crime, which is what we should expect from a global crime syndicate. Well done, Steve. Thank you for helping put that into perspective for us. The wall. Trump says it'll be about 18 or 20 billion, whatever. You got people arguing over this, whether or not they should provide the funding over 10 years for the wall. You know, there's something about this equation that's not really being looked at totally. You know, to me, if you look at this, if you build the wall and over the next 10 years it keeps out 5, 7, 8, 10 million illegals, or even 5 million illegals, whatever it may be, we know it's in the millions of people who will be kept out of the country because of the barrier at the border, the wall. Think how much money we will save, because we know that a fairly healthy percentage of these people who come into the country illegally end up going through the prison system multiple times, and our prisons are full of these illegals who are costing the taxpayers anywhere from $25,000 to $35,000 a year just to house them in these prisons, not to mention the cost to the legal system, the judicial system, the money that we have to pay for attorneys to represent them, and the overall amount of cost involved in just prosecuting the crimes that they commit. Not to mention the massive amounts of millions and millions and millions of dollars, probably in the billions of dollars over a 10-year period of time, that is spent, that money that is spent from the various benefits that they are able to get, particularly in sanctuary cities and cities where they look the other way. Not to mention the driving down wages, money that is being generated that is not being taxed, puts more tax burden on everyone else. So when you take a look at the entire mathematical equation of what the cost of illegal immigration is, and then you look at the cost of the wall, if you subtract the cost of illegal immigration from the cost of the wall, I promise you that number comes pretty close to evening itself out over 10 years. It's not a zero-sum game. There's billions of dollars that will be saved by securing the border. What that exact number is, I don't know, but we know it's in the billions of dollars. Not to mention, you cannot put a price on saving lives. And we don't know that terrorists couldn't come across that border. We know there's a lot of illegal drugs comes across that border. We know there's a lot of gangs, gang members, guys who come across that border and go into the cities and join gangs and things like that. So there is I think someone needs to do a real cost-benefit analysis on the wall and look at the amount of money that we will save by preventing the illegal immigration that's happening every day compared to the cost of the wall. Essentially, the wall will pay for itself. It's a good investment, and walls work. A couple of weeks ago, we covered a story here about a very wealthy Canadian couple who owned a pharmaceutical company who was connected to the Clintons. There was their company that supplied a lot of the meds through the Clinton Foundation to go to Haiti and other places in the world. We also know they were contributors to the Rotten Reverend Clinton campaign and to the Clinton Foundation. Their names, of course, were Barry and Honey Sherman. They were, of course, found hanging, basically, both of them. At first, the authorities in Canada thought they initially ruled as a murder-suicide. But the family, the kids of the Shermans, didn't buy it. They hired a couple private investigators who did their own investigation and determined it was murder, homicide. So now the Canadian government has looked at that a second time, and now the prosecutor there in Canada has come back and agreed, yes, it most likely was a homicide. So they now have an extensive list of people to be questioned. I wonder if the Clintons are on that list of people to be questioned. Of course, now we have the FBI saying they could not find Andy McCabe's text messages. And of course, we know that the DOJ sent some stuff over to Mueller, who blacked a lot of things out, who redacted a lot of things. It appears as if the FBI and the DOJ and Mueller are all working together to try to cover each other. But it's not going to work. Grassley's committee and Nunes's committee and Bob Goodlatte's committee, they've had enough. They've been stonewalled for all this time, and I just get the feeling from listening to all three of these guys, I've seen them all on TV in the last couple of days, and they're not very happy, and they're fed up. And I don't think they're going to let this slide. I think they're going to want a complete investigation, and they're going to try to lean on Sessions. They don't even bother dealing with Rosenstein anymore. They already know he's dirty, and that's going to be revealed in the memo. In fact, it will probably be the end of Rod Rosenstein. It will likely be the end of Comey, and it could very well be the end of the Mueller investigation. They need to just turn this over to the U.S. Marshals. And I agree with Tom Fitton. Turn it over to the U.S. Marshals. Let them come in the way they do. Walk into the DOJ, the FBI, and the Mueller's office and take what they want. By lawful order. Because it's a criminal investigation by the people who have oversight. That's the Congress. Mr. Nunes, Mr. Goodlatte, Trey Gowdy's Oversight Committee. 4 different committees, Mr. Grassley, they have oversight into all of this. They have a right to every single document. Speaking of Trey Gowdy, the Pitbull says that the FISA Memo will reveal the Rotten Reverend Clinton's role in the dossier scandal. Exactly. Which is why Grassley's committee sent off that letter to all those Clinton campaign people. But if you notice, the people who are going to be the recipients of the letter, that Hillary for America, the DNC, it was Donna Brazile, Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz, Podesta, others in the campaign, Robbie Mook, you notice that none of them letters went specifically to the Rotten Reverend Clinton. And that's bad news if you're the Reverend, because you don't know what all these other people are going to say to try to save their neck. And why wouldn't they send a letter to the Rotten Reverend? Because they're not ready for her yet. She's the target. She is the target. So they're going to get everybody else's take on exactly what the answer is to all those questions. And once they get all that information combined with the other information and evidence they've put together, when they finally get ready and they got all their ducks in a row, then they're going to go after the target. That is the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Adam Schiff, the bug-eyed fool, is right now working behind the scenes with his friends to plan a strategy for how to deal with the memo when it's released. And it appears that they're going to go for the full scorched earth policy once the memo is released. That is the plan that they have. Unfortunately, for the bug-eyed fool, that is not going to work. It's not going to work, Mr. Schiff. You can go ahead and run a scorched earth policy, but the only people who are going to be paying attention are the million or so people who watch MSNBC and CNN. They have very small audiences, and they're the only ones that's going to run this game. Yeah, you might get the New York Times, you might get the Washington Post to even jump on board, but not for long. They'll be jumping off very, very soon, because they know eventually people are going to go to other sources to find out what's really going on when they realize that you're bullshitting them. And they have a lot of money, and they have stockholders. Money and stockholders are going to determine the behavior of these organizations. So you can go ahead and run the scorched earth policy, Mr. Schiff, you bug-eyed fool. But it's going to fail. No one really likes you very much anyway, Mr. Schiff. Florida Democratic Mayor Joy Cooper has been removed from office after being charged with 3 felony counts of corruption, accepting illegal campaign contributions, money laundering, and official misconduct. And it appears that she finally accepted $8,000 in cash in a Dunkin' Donuts bag given to her by undercover agents back in August 2012. They ran a little sting on her, and she bit. So there's another Democrat mayor going down in flames. And those little bitty crimes are minuscule compared to many of these other Democrats on the national scale, such as Wasserman Schultz, the Rotten Reverend, her crooked peckered husband, Loretta Lynch, Powers, Rice, Rhodes, Comey, McCabe, all those people. What they did was a million times worse than this mayor in Florida. And she's going down, and so are all of them. Well, now we have Justice Ginsburg, who's now 84, refusing to retire. She's going to try to outlive the Trump presidency. Do you think she'll outlive the Trump presidency? I don't know. They say she's in pretty good physical shape, but mentally she's nuts. And of course, who can forget that great photo, one of my favorites, from back in 2015, when Barack Obama was giving his State of the Union speech. And you know, they have the Supreme Court, they get the front seat at the State of the Union. They're seated right down front and center, all the Supreme Court justices. And the camera was panning across the audience as Obama was given his State of the Union in 2015. And as it panned across and it came over to the Supreme Court, sitting there in the front and center in the front row, there was all the other Supreme Court justices looking up, watching Long Mac Daddy, Hussein Obama, except for Ginsburg. She was literally like this. Shoulders slumped, her head completely down. She was totally in a deep, deep sleep. She was completely knocked out. She was probably sawing logs right next to the other justices. They probably were like, hey, wake up, wake up. I'll never forget that photo. That was so funny. I mean, it was just because you see all the Supreme Court justices all sitting upright and they're all looking at Obama, except for one right in the middle, the little tiny woman, and her head's down like this. She's slumped over. She's totally snoozing, man. I don't know if she's going to make it to 2020. I really don't. At some point, maybe John Roberts will just tell her, you know, you're just not even mentally competent to be sitting in this on the Supreme Court. You really got to go. But who knows? She said that she's trying to go till she's 90 or something. I don't know. I don't know if she's going to make it, because that would put her at just about 90 when Trump gets to 2020. And he's going to be reelected, so there's no way she'll make it through 2 terms. But she doesn't want to leave the court because she knows that her seat will be replaced by probably a pretty conservative judge. So she only wants to stay alive to spite Trump at this point, I guess is what you could say for Justice Ginsburg. And of course, she was appointed to the court by Slick Willie. We'll see if she falls asleep during Trump's State of the Union. Actually, I heard she's not going to be there. She's not going to attend. I'd be perfectly fine if not a single damn Democrat attended. That'd be just fine with me. Well, Milos Zeman of the Czech Republic has just been reelected. He was first elected in 2013. He just won a very sound re-election victory in the Czech Republic, and he was the first really Trump-style populist type president who really started this real anti-EU thing from the Eastern Bloc. Now he's joined by Poland and other Eastern Bloc countries, and of course he's similar to Trump. He's a populist. He hates the EU. He's completely opposed to the mass migration and the immigration policy of the EU. He's a guy who speaks his mind, not very much a political guy, and as we can see, he's been successful and he's been reelected. And as I've said many times on here, the collapse of the EU is coming, but it's going to come primarily from the Eastern Bloc and work west. And obviously the Mediterranean will be affected too. But that's the place to look. That's where the beginning of the end is for the EU. And so winning re-election is a big deal. And we'll just have to see where all this goes. But congratulations to Milos Zeman for defeating the New World Order Eurocrats again. And they cannot be very happy about that, I can assure you. Because they worked very hard to get rid of him, and it did not work. And it's just setting the stage for what's to come in the EU. And these Eastern Bloc EU countries will be the first to go. And then it will just, it'll be like dominoes at that point. They'll all fall. Trump is working with Nunes to get the memo released. Could be this week. Yeah, you know Trump wants that memo released as bad as anybody. And so he is working with Nunes, and I understand Nunes, of course, is not going to go to the DOJ, the FBI, and let them have a look first. Trump, of course, is the head of the executive branch. He speaks for the DOJ and the FBI, essentially. So, it really doesn't matter what they say. He is the head of the executive branch of which they reside. And if Trump decides that he wants to release it, that's what he's going to do. And he's already made it pretty clear that he supports the release of the memo. So it appears that Nunes and Trump have been working together to get that done. Some people are even suggesting that Nunes may get that to him as early as tomorrow. Now, the president can just immediately let it go, or he can let it sit on his desk for 5 days, what automatically would then go and be released to the public. So we'll be looking forward to that. And I suspect that once that memo comes out, things are going to get very, very ugly. You can turn up the heat on this thing about 100 degrees or so, because that's really going to speed things up, kick it into a completely different gear. It's going to open up the floodgates for everything else. It's going to set the stage for everything else that these other committee members want to do. And keep in mind, Grassley and Goodlatte, still, their committees are still working on their thing, and when they're done, they're also going to be producing these types of memos and releasing them. It appears that Goodlatte and Nunes and Grassley are going to release a little dossier of their own, one that tells the truth. Well, I've been torn over the last couple of days trying to decide, because it is Monday, who could win the award for Dumbass of the Week. It's just too tough this week. I can't decide. I'm torn. So I'm going to leave it up to all of you in the comments section to decide who wins the award for Dumbass of the Week. So we have two people who quite honestly deserve Dumbass of the Week. One of them has already received that award once on TowerGate. But the two candidates are Chelsea Clinton and her mom, the Rotten Reverend Clinton. They're battling it out head-to-head for Dumbass of the Week, and I can't decide. So you can decide for me in the comments section who is the Dumbass of the Week. So what did Chelsea do that would qualify her? Well, she's giving a speech, and in this speech, she's, of course, pushing for eugenics and population reduction. Chelsea says that, quote, women's rights are climate change issues. Really? She wants women to abort their babies and have fewer children because global population is exploding. Of course, Chelsea has two little demons of her own, but that's okay because she's an elitist. And of course, the elitist can have all the kids that they want. It's only the rest of us that cannot have kids. They can have all the kids they want. They can have 5 different homes, sucking God knows how many kilowatts of juice. They can have private planes. They can travel around doing all the things that they do, leaving this huge carbon footprint, but that's okay because they're elitist. That's okay for them. Now, I'm surprised that the little demons are still alive. And keep in mind, Chelsea Clinton is the byproduct of the getting together between the Right Reverend Clinton and Webster Hubbell. She is the child of Hillary Clinton and Webster Hubbell. Chelsea Clinton is. And do you remember when the Right Reverend Clinton passed out and they said she had a horrible case of pneumonia? What did she do? She went right back to Chelsea's place where the two little demons were, her grand demons. And you would think that most grandmothers wouldn't do that. If you're a grandmother and you've got a horrible case of pneumonia that caused you to pass out, would you go back and have close contact with your two grandbabies? Most grandmas wouldn't, but the Right Reverend Clinton would. So the little demons are lucky they're alive. So that makes Chelsea Clinton certainly a candidate for Dumbass of the Week. I guess Chelsea Clinton has never looked into a country called Russia, which she should know a lot about because her mother and her so-called father accepted $148 million from those Russians. They turned over 20% of America's uranium to them. Bill Clinton got a $500,000 tip talking to Russian oligarchs. You would think that she'd have a pretty good grip on what things are like in Russia and the Russian Federation. They have a big problem in the Russian Federation, and that is that they are not reproducing children fast enough to keep up with their aging population. They have a population crisis in Russia, but it's not too many people. It's not enough. They're not making enough babies in Russia. They also have a brain drain going on there because people are leaving to go to other places in Europe that are not so corrupt, where they have an opportunity at a decent life. So the problem in Russia is not enough population, not overpopulation. But there's other places where that could be an issue, including in the United States. Yes, there are some African countries that are overpopulated, but and they are not socially engineered for that because they don't have the systems to support it. But the world can certainly support the population. That's not the issue. Only an idiot like Chelsea Clinton would think this way because she is, of course, a New World Order demon eugenicist. So, there you go. Then we have the Rotten Reverend Clinton, who just made this bizarre video where she's thanking feminist and activist bitches for their activism and their feminism. Not really sure how many martinis Hillary had before she uploaded that video, but I'm sure she had at least 7 or 8 in her, because to make a video like that, and she looked pretty sloshed, you have to be an idiot. And Hillary wanted to know why she was not 50 points ahead and why she lost so bigly. Lock her up. Yes, that was a crazy little video. I don't know if you saw it, but doing that video to thank feminists and activist bitches for their activism and feminism certainly has to rank up there and give her a shot at the title. So you tell me in the comments section, my friends, who is the dumbass of the week? Is it Chelsea or the Rotten Reverend? Chelsea or the Rotten Reverend? I'll check to see what you all think. I quite honestly can't make a decision. It's that close. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with more breaking news on TowerGate. Guys, have a good night. See you.